Greetings and welcome. My name is Nariza Rashid, and I'm the host of today's ASQ Lean Enterprise Division webinar. We hold these webinars once each month, and they are free to all our members. Our topic for August 14th is proven tips for successful root cause analysis, and the presenter is Michael Levin Hagen. Our topic for today is causing improvement through others, part 1, and the presenter is Eric Budd. Eric is an improvement leader who successfully employs lean methods to generate improvements in both manufacturing and non-manufacturing process, including applying setup reduction methods to an annual inventory process, converting a manual time reporting process to a web-based app, and reducing a bank's small business loan approval process from 2 weeks to 4 hours. Eric continually seeks to implement approaches to leadership, feedback processes, compensation, and improvement based upon the work of W. Edwards Deming. Prior to returning to Michigan, Eric worked as an ACE coordinator at United Technologies, where he taught and led VSM value stream mapping and lean implementation events. Eric was a co-developer of the original version of the CQI Academy and has led and updated the CQI Academy since 2012 and now leads the new IQI Academy. In 2017, the Michigan Lean Consortium MLC honored Eric with their Distinguished Service Award. He holds a Bachelor's in Information Management and a Master's in Quality Management Systems and participates on the ASQ Deming Middle Committee. Some logistics. Everyone will be on mute, but you're free to post questions to the presenter, Eric, as you think of them. Eric has reserved about 10 minutes at the end to answer your questions, which we will take one at a time. And here's Eric.
Thank you, Nariza. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. There's a lot we want to share about what we are learning in this experiment, so much so that we have chosen to divide this webinar into two parts. Part one will cover some of the reasons we are on the path we are on. We will also talk about some of the structures that appear to be vital for success. And then we will introduce some of the important key principles and concepts that have presented themselves during our work, especially as they're related to Deming's system of profound knowledge. Part two of this webinar will be presented during the October ASQ Lean Division webinar. In part two, we will not only wrap up what we have to share about key concepts and principles, we will be joined by a co-creator of this process, Heidi Nielsen, to help us describe how we are proceeding with coaching the coach and coaching the team leaders. Finally, it has become quite apparent that there are issues we all face when attempting to lead, train, and introduce people in our workplaces to new ways of thinking and working. In October, we will also discuss those common issues. By way of reminder, what we are sharing today is a work in progress. It is based upon the work we have performed as coaches and coachees so far. We will discuss the principles of improvement and training and development, which have made themselves apparent while we have been conducting our experiments. Because this remains a work in progress, you may want to contribute your observations and suggestions about what we are doing. Feel free to contact me using the email address on our slides. In one sense, we began the work we are sharing today about 27 years ago. Mary Jenkins, Adrian Bass, and myself were the early developers and facilitators of the CQI Academy, now known as the IQI Academy for Quality Management Fundamentals. The modern version of the Academy has been offered since 2012. The six-session Academy is based on the methods and philosophy of W. Edwards Deming that lead to systemic improvement when used in any organization. Deming, as many of you know, played a large role in the recovery of Japan's industries after World War II, helping them become part of a world-class economy that continues to lead quality standards today. During the Academy workshops, participants use a work-based project as their primary method for learning through application. They also interact with and learn from each other's experiences while addressing the actual problems presented to them through their project. They learn how to apply Dr. Deming's principles regarding systems, variation, psychology, and theory of knowledge in their everyday lives. We collect feedback from every participant following each session in an effort to better understand how well we are doing in our teaching methods. Because Academy participants are provided an extensive collection of materials that includes all slides, exercises, and reference materials from the course, I was curious about whether or not those materials continue to be used after the Academy. I created a short 3-question survey for modern era Academy graduates. To enhance my own learning, I documented my predictions about possible responses to the 3 questions before they were sent out. My predictions are documented in the red bars on each chart with actual responses appearing in green. To my surprise, no one had thrown away their notebook. However, there were respondents who had given it away to someone they worked with. A full 93% of respondents reported that they could put their hands on their Academy notebook without too much trouble. Another surprise to me was the percentage of people who reported using their materials recently. 25% reported using their Academy materials in the past month, and another 40% reported using them in the past year. Answers to my 3rd question pointed us down the path we are on today. If you used your Academy notebook since participating, for what purpose or purposes did you use it? Here are my predictions for how people would respond to this 3rd question. Look up personal notes, look up a quote, review an exercise, review how to use one of the tools, refresh what was learned about a concept. Here's what people actually said. I used this book at management meetings, and we worked through various quality processes and staff issues. I've used the material to talk about the IQI class and some of the principles. I've also continued to work on my project. I've used it for reference in updating my company's continuous improvement training on problem solving. I've used it as a reference for various steps in the PDSA process for my work issues. To refresh myself on the principles of Deming, to make a point when I'm in a meeting with other staff who have completed IQI, when we are encountering system-related barriers within our agency. I've conducted at least 7 PDSAs in the last 7 months, and have tried to encourage non-IQI graduates to do the same, instead of having them commit to lengthy, vague, and undefined pilots, which is our typical course of action. Heidi Nielsen is a modern era IQI Academy graduate. After responding to the survey, Heidi contacted me and suggested that we get together to talk about it. During our meeting, she made a recommendation that we turn into a concept for the next IQI course offering. She said, now that you've taught people how to perform improvement work, we should teach people how to be improvement leaders. The IQI Board of Directors oversees the work of the Institute for Quality and Innovation, including the IQI Academy. They said, sounds good. Frank Murdoch, who among the many hats he wears, is a member of the IQI Board of Directors. We learned Frank is a troublemaker when he said, you should create a minimal viable product, an MVP. And of course we responded, sure, we can do that. And then immediately asked ourselves, well, how are we going to do that? We applied the concept of paper doll layouts from 3P and Kaizen events we've run on the manufacturing floor. 3P stands for production preparation process. During a manufacturing 3P event, after a cell design and selection process, we move to the manufacturing floor and make life-size cutouts of the spaces we intend to occupy. This makes it easier to visualize the potential issues before moving to building more permanent structures. Here we see the relationships between our IQI coach, our coach in training, who is the figure in red. We are working toward training a person in how to effectively coach a leader of an improvement team. Although there are simple one-to-one relationships from IQI coach to coach in training, and then from coach in training to improvement team leader, there's a certain level of challenge in what are we trying to accomplish, which is develop and deliver the structures and experiences necessary to make it possible for a coach in training to consistently produce effective improvement team leaders. For our MVP, we needed an IQI coach, a graduate coach in training, and a graduate team leader with a team. In our MVP, I am able to fill the role of IQI coach. Heidi Nielsen fills the requirements for a coach in training, and the company she works for has several Academy graduates who can fill the role of team leader. So far, we worked with 2 such graduates during our MVP test. We decided to record as much as possible about our interactions, not knowing ahead of time those things that will make a difference. For capturing overall ideas, concepts, and our thinking about things, we are using a mind map. The version of mind map that you see is recorded in a tool called Mind Manager from the company MindJet. For our phone conversations, we are using a free conference call service that provides recording. Our call notes are captured in a Google Docs document. In addition to making notes during our sessions, we go back to add illustrations of concepts discussed, either from our work with the team or from materials that I've used in training Kaizen teams and Academy participants, or from other sources. Now we want to talk about vital structures for success, because the concept of structures is fundamental to how we are able to function in our organizations. We use a broad definition of structure when we use the term. Structure is anything that repeatedly and persistently influences the interactions in a system. With that definition, we begin to understand that structures determine behaviors in our organization. In the canyon photograph, the riverbed and rock formations are the structure. The river flows through the path of least resistance in this structure. While the river at one time played a significant role in creating the structure of the canyon, it now has no choice but to follow the paths that have been etched in the rock. Of the several vital structures that we've experienced during our MVP experiment, there are 3 that are especially influential. The 3 basic questions, integrity, and the plan, do, study, act cycle. I first learned about the 3 basic questions from Ron Moen and Cliff Norman many years ago when they taught a group of EDS quality advisors on the General Motors account about the foundation for improvement and quality as a business strategy. The questions are simple, powerful, and are seldom answered by leaders or teams in the sequence that produces the best results. With question number 1, what are we trying to accomplish? We state our aim, our purpose, or our ultimate destination. Question number 2, how will we know that a change is an improvement? Helps us agree ahead of time, before any changes are made, what we will say is progress toward our aim, or that we have arrived. Question number 3 is the answer almost everybody leaps to immediately. What changes can we make that will result in improvement? We state the question as what moves can we make, because it makes our answers practical, testable, and pragmatic. The 3 basic questions provide the foundation for an iterative approach to addressing the concept of true north. Our MVP work has provided us with some insights into the 3 basic questions. Question number 1 is intended to be a view of your journey's destination, not a description of what it will take to get there. A few weeks into our work, we conducted a 3-level meeting with all leaders plus the improvement team. The team had been floundering. We conducted a short exercise that made it possible to identify that individual team members had been operating with different aims, unexpressed nor discussed. Clarifying, unifying, and simplifying the team's answers to question number 1 made it possible for them to begin focusing on the right work for their aims. With question number 2, we addressed the fact that all improvement requires change, but not all change produces improvement. Question number 2 also helps us clarify what it is that we should and should not be measuring during our improvement test cycles. We have found that it takes practice to produce useful answers to question number 2. In the beginning, most answers are too vague and nonspecific to be able to evaluate our progress. The development of the Q2 banned words list was in response to this problem. Question number 3 is usually the first and sometimes the only question that leaders and teams answer. Our use of the word move here is broad. It includes the usual things that we might think of as changing the location of a piece of equipment or signage. Move also includes changing the sequence of process steps, such as the move made by ATM vendors that require you to take your ATM card out of the machine before completing your transaction. That simple move of the sequence of steps without changing any of the steps has improved the abandoned ATM card rate significantly. In addition to moving something physical or moving a process step, moves can include changes of approval authority or implementation of an operational definition of something like, what do we call a defect? We have found that it is very useful to revisit the 3 basic questions frequently. We learn as we go, and often what we thought was just over the horizon, out of view, is not the thing we discover after our test. Here's a set of questions, here's a set of answers provided by our team several weeks into our MVP project. What are we trying to accomplish? Reduce deviations. How will we know that a change is an improvement? No missed cleanings. What moves can we make that will produce improvement? Make day shift always responsible for rooms X and Y, and make night shift always responsible for rooms A and B. Cleaning to be conducted on all rooms in series. Cover the dailies as a topic at every end of shift meeting for days and start of shift for nights. The team made its predictions prior to implementing this method. They predicted the method will work for 2 weeks, but as soon as an atypical business day hits, a room will be missed. The method will stop missed cleanings, but will lead to more waste in cleaning rooms that don't need it. Our coaching call conversation about this included: what will be moved? Responsibilities for cleaning specific rooms. We need a plan B for an atypical business day. A method to avoid impact from an atypical business day is to move cleaning times away from the end of shift to mid or start of shift so that cleaning is not impacted by events arising during this shift. Within our definition of structure, anything that repeatedly or persistently influences the interactions in a system, integrity is a powerful influence on the interactions of our systems, as well as our ability to perform. From across the spectrum of leadership teachings, integrity is seen as foundational. For our purposes here, we are not viewing integrity from a good or bad or right or wrong perspective. The definition we are choosing to apply is that of being whole and complete. We have seen time and again when integrity declines, so does performance. We often fail to notice when we are out of integrity with our commitments. It is both common and commonly accepted to believe that pushing my commitment from yesterday to today is inconsequential. No result plus a good excuse equals the promised result. The ability to recognize the presence of the thinking made visible in this equation is vital to leaders and especially to coaches. Deming taught us about operational definitions in his book, Out of the Crisis. He wrote that an operational definition is one that people can do business with. This definition of integrity, keeping your word and on time, and its corollaries is one that we can do business with. We put into place two very similar structures that support having integrity in our work. The first is a daily 6:30 a.m. 10-minute phone conversation with a simple structure to follow. What did I promise to do yesterday? What did I actually do? What structure supported my results? Sometimes what is shared is a lack of structures to ensure a commitment was kept. And finally, what am I promising to do today? The second structure is an almost identical sequence that we use for phone check-in when scheduling prevents an in-person conversation. The final structure that has proved vital for use is the application of the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, PDSA, for learning and improvement. An entire day could be spent on training on the PDSA cycle, and a lifetime can be spent learning about how to make each phase more effective for teams. I will cover a few of the observations we made during our MVP journey. Just to refresh, Plan includes developing both the moves that will be tested, as well as documenting your predictions about the results your test will produce. Do ensures you actually run the test you plan to run. Do is also the beginning of your data collection and analysis. Study puts it all together: the test you ran, the results and the data the test produced, and the predictions you made about those results. These elements combine to enable learning by asking, now what do we know? ACT provides you with choices regarding what's next. You might adopt the changes, putting them into your production environment as is. You might adapt by modifying your approach or retesting under different conditions, perhaps a different location or a different shift, or abandon. Sometimes the test produces results for which the only appropriate answer is, let's never do that again. Many have learned about kata. It contains some of the elements of the three basic questions and the PDSA cycle while leaving some out. Kata can be a useful tool. It can also be enhanced with an understanding of theories that make the three basic questions in the PDSA cycle work. We've observed some things about PDSA cycles that we're beginning to develop into suggestions for effective implementation. PDSA provides a simple but powerful way to know what one should do next by producing tangible results. Better results and longer-lasting organizational improvements are possible when we include operators in the plan and study work of the PDSA cycle. Resistance to testing is sometimes present when people, especially managers, believe that a permanent change is being implemented. It is important to remember that it is a bit like shopping for shoes. We find a pair that looks like they will work, we try them on, walk back and forth a bit, and take them off. They may or may not come home with us, or they may get shipped back to Zappos depending on how you buy your shoes. Drive out fear so that everyone may work effectively for the company is point 8 of Deming's 14 points for management. We've observed that it is more often managers and not operators who are fearful of running small experiments. We will touch on some of the possible reasons for this in our discussion of psychology. Producing the foundational work of making it possible to perform effective study of your test takes practice. Some people who have been practicing PDCA or kata may need to develop their muscles in this area. Whenever one is involved in the leadership of improvement activity, one or more of Deming's system or profound knowledge areas will provide key concepts and principles. Today, we will share about concepts that arise from the area of psychology. Deming described the system of profound knowledge as an outside view of our organization. He wrote, "The layout of profound knowledge appears here in 4 parts, all related to each other: appreciation for a system, knowledge about variation, theory of knowledge, psychology." He said, "One need not be immanent in any part, nor in all 4 parts, in order to understand it and to apply it." In our lean world, our relationships are more effective if we possess respect for people. A shorthand description of the impact of Deming's approach to psychology could be described as restoration of the individual. There are 4 elements of our MVP work which we want to share that fall under the umbrella of psychology. 2 of the elements are closely related concepts of lost and loss in the face of change. The 3rd element we want to discuss is our experience with team development and learning. And the final element we will talk about is the 3 sources of upset. Recent brain research tells us that we use cells called grid cells to help keep track of relationships, both spatial and conceptual. In a very real sense, we create maps or stable relationships between the various things we know about. When we learn, it is easiest to learn in a way that allows us to connect what we know to the new knowledge we are gaining. This is a primary reason we use projects from work to teach people about the Deming system of profound knowledge. If our knowledge is too far removed from what we know, and our maps or mental relationships no longer work for us, we experience feelings of being lost, literally, and often begin to behave as do people who have become lost in the woods. People may also experience changes in their world as a loss. We cannot tell people how they should feel about a particular change, or that they should not feel as if they are losing something. We all feel the different degrees of loss when a change occurs in our daily lives. Even though the loss that process changes bring are not nearly as severe as those experienced by the study subject who contributed to the development of the Kubler-Ross curve, we can expect that people will experience some level of loss as a result of change, and they will go through these stages. People are not being difficult nor resistant, they are being human. We can expect, for the most part, that time spent in the phases of the curve will be temporary. Good managers and coaches will not try to short circuit the work people are doing to move through each of these phases, but to support it. Many of us are aware of the stages of team development: forming, storming, norming, performing. One of the outcomes of a performing team is learning how to learn together. This is not a skill that all teams will learn. It takes practice, and it takes a willingness to work at it, because the only way to become effective at learning as a team is to spend time and effort learning as a team. An overlooked aspect of the stages of team development is the fact that all changes in team membership, whether it be the loss of a team member or the addition of a new member joining the team, forces the team to return to forming. What is frequently misunderstood is that this is a meeting by meeting principle. Different team composition creates the dynamic, forcing a team to redevelop the social interactions and dynamics that were previously formed with a different combination of individuals. Unfortunately, most managers and team leaders are unaware of this source of ineffective team performance. Finally, we're going to review the 3 sources of upset. Team leaders and coaches who are all subject to being upset from time to time. Storming is an expected part of team development. However, remaining in upset is unproductive. A useful way to understand our upsets is to know the 3 sources. undelivered communication, unfulfilled expectation, and thwarted intention. Pardon me. From this understanding, we get to know our own upsets. We get to own them. We get to see that we generate them ourselves. Knowing the sources of our upsets makes it possible to address them ourselves without waiting for someone else to alter their behavior. This is extremely useful in a team setting. In our October webinar, we hope to be joined by Heidi Nielsen. We will discuss the remaining key concepts and principles connected to appreciation for a system, understanding variation, theory of knowledge. We will also include our observations from coaching the coach, coaching the team leader. We will include a timeline of our MVP activities and outcomes and discuss our common issues and provide a few useful resources. So now we have time for questions.
Hi, Eric. We have one question here. They wanted to know, the webinar was titled as Rapid Improvement Cycles and DEMING'S System of Profound Knowledge. And it says, so can you expand, or can you explain them why the title was different from what we have sent out?
Oh, I think in our early conversations, we were talking about the impact of using the PDSA cycle and short tests. One of the mantras we use is, what's a test we can run and learn from today? However, this is all within the context of the work we're doing on developing coaches who can produce effective team leaders. So that's what we ended up doing. We changed the title to more appropriately fit the topic.
So your part 2 is going to be the continuation of this?
Yes, we'll finish up with the remainder of the topics that we've listed, as well as demonstrate the work that the team has produced. And in addition to some of the things that have worked for them, we'll also discuss some of the things that haven't worked. Those are just as important for us to address.
So your next presentation is in October, and then
Yes.
we can continue from there. Okay. So far, the handouts, the first one, they were able to download. The next handout, the Deming's 14 points. Most of them were not able to. I have one more question here. What's Eric's viewing on teaching utilizing formal change management process?
Can you say, well,
sure, I can say
the question was, what's my view on
change management process, teaching utilizing formal change management process?
Yeah, one of the most important things distinctions to make is something we talked about in the webinar is all improvement requires change, but not all change produces improvement. So in order for us to produce improvement, not simply change that may or may not result in improvement, we need to have a process that allows us to learn as we go. So one of the key factors in producing change that results in improvement, helps us to accomplish the aims we're trying to achieve, is to approach our work with the 3 basic questions and then PDSA cycles. Managing that across an organization is something that's very fun to do. You could do it with multiple groups and teams operating at the same time. In the introduction, Nerissa said I had worked on a small business loan process that had originally was taking people about 2 weeks to 4 weeks to produce a finalized approved loan. We reduced the timing of that to 4 hours. That was the result of 3 separate teams working together on PDSA cycles for a period of about 4 to 6 months. So we can manage significant change through learning. And that would be my recommendation for people.
We have one more question here, which says, which impacts success more, psychology versus a structured approach, and why?
Well, I tend to believe with Dr. Deming, you can't separate those things. Structured approaches come from our understanding about how things work, and our view and understanding about how things work are truly based on our assumptions about the world. And once we start dealing with our assumptions, we're getting into the realm of psychology. So there's an interaction between those elements of what is it that's developing the structures that we build and put in place in our organizations? How do we modify them? Do we first modify the structure, or do we go after the assumptions? It's a worthwhile exercise for leaders to look at. We have a result that we don't appreciate. Let's look at the structures that are producing that result. And then let's look at the thinking and assumptions that underlie those structures and see if we can change the thinking that then produce different structures that then produce different results.
We have quite a few questions. I'll take as many as we can. So the next question we have here is, what can you do to prevent the 3 sources of upset?
I don't know that you can prevent them. I think what you can do is realize that they exist, and to understand that when you're upset, look at yourself and say, all right, is it a function of a communication I didn't deliver? Do I have an intention that got thwarted? So, et cetera. So all 3 are present usually in some kind of upset. So which one's predominant? And then explore with yourself. So sometimes the dealing with upset requires some personal work. Certainly, it's a thing worth practice, and it's a thing that is always going to be ongoing. We live in a world that mostly we don't always get what we want, and sometimes we get upset as a result of it, and we can choose how we want to respond if we're somewhat self-aware.
We have a couple of questions on MVP. What is MVP, and how far along is MVP development, launch, and feedback?
Yeah, so the MVP means minimal viable product, and it comes from a concept of what's the smallest thing that you can produce and interact with some type of some customer and evaluate, is this a worthwhile approach or not? And then do we need to continue on with this approach, or do we want to pivot? In our work, we've run into several. We're going to talk about some of the issues we've run into. We've run into issues that make it challenging to continue on an ongoing basis with a single project for any committed period of time. And so the MVP, in our intention, was to work about 6 months at this. We had a design where we were going to work for a few months together, regroup, and then do a few more months together, and then turn our learning into course content and a methodology that we can begin training improvement coaches. So that was our intention around our MVP. I don't know if that addressed the question.
Probably we'll wait for the response if they have a response. But the next question that I have here is how to make leaders understand about strategic quality assurance. Should I repeat this, Eric? Did you get it?
Well, I guess it depends on what we mean by that. What do we mean by strategic quality assurance would be my question.
Okay. I think that they were satisfied with your MVP question, just so you are aware.
Thank you.
So we do have a couple of on the storming, norming, team building questions. So many times for team building, FSNP stages, not enough time is on hand as improvement, a change required. So change requires time, since change required are time sensitive. What do you do in such situations? They're asking.
Well, it's frequently a concern. Deming often said, "This isn't instant pudding." We frequently live in a world that wants results immediately, and yet there's some things that take time to put in place, to alter. Sometimes it takes a long time to deal with the interactions and the psychology of the individuals involved. And we think by altering a tool or altering something simple that we can produce a long-lasting result. And this typically isn't the case. There's a need for us to understand the issues and then deal with the underlying sources of our issues, or for us to say, what is it we're going to create? And then how do we want to go about creating that? Either approach takes some willingness to put in the time and not think that we're going to get instant results.
I'm not sure whether what this question is clear, but it says, please repeat your numbers, P's. They're referring to, should have been 3 P's, sorry. Okay.
Oh, production preparation process.
Good. Okay. What's the difference between thwarted intention and unfulfilled expectations? There's one more question I have. We can.
Oh, okay. So a thwarted intention is something where I wanted to do something and I was prevented from doing that. An unfulfilled expectation is something I expect someone else to be doing.
Are we okay on time? We are okay on time. So should I continue? Eric, can I continue still with a few more questions?
Sure.
Are we okay to take? Okay. How long should the storming process be allowed to continue before changing team members because the storming doesn't stop?
So that's a very individual question depending on the team and the source of the storming. There was a team that I interacted with where we had someone that we might have described as a naysayer as part of the team. Pretty much everything this person said occurred as negative to the rest of the team, and it was frustrating the entire team. The team leader was asked to go to each of the team members and say, can you shift your listening for the naysayer and listen to everything that comes out of that person's mouth as if it's pure gold? So it altered the interactions on the team immediately. The naysayer was no longer frustrated with not being heard, quit repeating himself. It turned out that some of the facts that he wanted to present were important for the team's success. And the storming phase disappeared when we started to listen to each other. Sometimes when we argue a point repeatedly and insist that other people hear us rather than we hear other people, storming might continue. But like I said, it's a very specific to each team situation. So I don't know that there's a generic answer. That's something we need to approach in the moment.
One more I'll take, and I think some of the attendees were able to download the handouts, just so you are aware. And the next question is here is, how does the overall culture of an organization play a role in change improvement activities?
So one of the questions we want to ask is, what is the culture of the organization? So in one sense, it's what Dr. Deming talked about, is the interactions that exist between people in an organization. It's how we set up our expectations for each other, even spoken or unspoken. It's our willingness to, be partners with each other. It's our desire to support or not support each other. There's so many factors when we talk about culture of an organization. We want to be a little bit more clear about what we mean about that. But it's the culture is the in between. It's not how an individual performs, but it's how we work together. And so it has a huge impact on our ability to produce results together. We can have a group of people where 1 + 1 = 0 or less. And we can have another group of people where 1 + 1 = 3 or more. It's how well we work together that's the key thing. And I think that's an element of culture that we can attend to that will make a difference.
The other one is, in a world of metric units, will you address how an effective leader can be measured?
It would depend on what we're trying to accomplish. And would measurement actually produce the result we're looking for? It's easy to go stand on my scale every single morning and measure the weight and produce a number and put it on a chart and say that's a good or bad number. However, using metrics in that fashion don't produce any significant changes. So sometimes the things we measure are the things that people act upon, and they may not be the important things for us to address. So we want to be cautious about implementing a series of metrics without understanding both what those metrics are going to produce as far as behavior. We've seen some significant scandals in the corporate world based on certain metrics that people are trying to meet. And we also forget that there's some of the most important things that leaders do can't be measured. They're unknown and unknowable, and yet we need to manage with them. So that we want to proceed with caution in regard to that.
Thanks, Eric. The next question I have here may be more towards Frank. Frank would be able to answer this. I'm not sure. In terms of verification of having attended this webinar, will there be an updated email with the new content and verification of attendance? Frank, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, this is Frank Murdoch. I'm the Professional Development Chair of the Lean Enterprise Division and work with Nariza. So the question is, will there be an updated email? And each person should receive that, and in the email there'll be a link that provides them with a certificate for those that wish to use the time that they spent for recertification units. At the same time, because we've had some difficulty with the one handout not working through the system, so several people weren't able to download it. I think we'll make an effort to send a separate email with that handout included, so that those people who want to look and review Dr. Deming's 14 points for management can do so. Did that answer the question, Nariza?
I think so, yes. Thanks, Frank. The other last question, this will be the last question and we'll wrap it up. This question I'm diverting you to Eric. Do you find it worthwhile to have the team write charter initially with the participants to have them sign off to assure consistent integrity. Did you get that, Eric?
Yeah, in one sense, the use of the three basic questions is developing the content of what could be seen as a charter. Certainly, participation as a team together is very important. You want to make sure that everybody's aligned on what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and make sure that we agree on when we make changes, what are we evaluating to say we are making an improvement or not. Usually that's a consensus type process, not voting. So we want to make sure that everybody's aligned and supports, or at a minimum, at least can live with, here's what we're working on.
Okay, I would like to wrap up now. I would like to thank Eric and Frank for taking the time out to share with us some very important and interesting information that can be applied to any business organization and share the real-time application and experience. As I said earlier, Eric's presentation is now recorded and will be posted on the ASQ Lean Division YouTube channel later this week. Please join us again on October 9th for the conclusion of Eric's presentation. I want to remind you that the topic for the upcoming month, August, is proven tips for successful root cause analysis. Thanks to everyone for participating in today's webinar. Have a great day.